He didn't see it coming, not from his own blood, not from the brothers he played with as a boy. One moment he was wearing the robe his father gave him, the symbol of love, favor, and future. The next, he was stripped, beaten, and thrown into the pit like garbage, screaming their names, bleeding, crying, and they walked away without looking back. That pit wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was the death of everything he thought was real: trust, family, identity. But here's the part they never tell you. God was watching, and he said nothing. It's not because he didn't care, but because the silence was part of the story. It's the story of Joseph, not the cartoon version, not the Sunday school summary. This is the real, raw, painful, miraculous rise of a boy who lost everything only to gain more than he ever dreamed. It's not just history, it's a prophecy, and it's your story too, because everyone has a pit. Everyone has a prison. Everyone, if they don't quit, has a calling waiting to be fulfilled. So if you've ever felt forgotten, if you've ever cried out in the dark and heard nothing back, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why some of your greatest heartbreaks were never meant to destroy you. They were designed to position you for the throne. You see, life is a series of pits. Every one of us gets thrown into a hole in the ground. Sometimes it's a pit of our own making. Sometimes it's a circumstance. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a place. Sometimes it's a prison. For Joseph, it was all of the above. His pit was 11 brothers who hated him enough to strip him of his robe, of his dignity, of their father's blessing. In that moment, he lost everything that gave life meaning. No wonder he cried out. No wonder he screamed for help. No wonder he felt like quitting. But here's the thing. God was in that pit with him. And although he didn't speak, he didn't save him, wasn't through with him. In fact, that was just the beginning. If we quit when we hit the pit, we'll never fulfill our destiny. So this is what I need you to get in your spirit. Quitting is not an option. As long as you have breath, as long as you have life, as long as you have pain, there's purpose. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is proof that you're still alive. And if you're still alive, you still have a chance to fulfill your destiny. You see, Joseph didn't know it at the time, but his pain positioned him for power. His scars became his superpower. If you stay with me till the end, I'll show you how. In the shadowy depths of an Egyptian prison, a remarkable tale unfolds. This isn't your typical story. It's about resilience, faith, and a man named Joseph, who, despite facing unimaginable betrayals and hardships, never stopped believing in himself or his purpose. Picture this. Joseph, stripped of his identity, his dignity, and even his name, is flung into a prison cell in Egypt. His brothers, driven by envy and greed, had sold him into slavery, and now he's trapped in a labyrinth of despair. But Joseph is no ordinary man. Throughout his journey, he's demonstrated extraordinary qualities: wisdom, kindness, and a steadfast faith. As he faces this new challenge, these traits become his lifeline. In this unfamiliar and unforgiving environment, Joseph refuses to be broken. Instead, he finds purpose in serving the other prisoners. He becomes a beacon of hope in their darkest hours, offering solace and support. In doing so, he not only uplifts those around him, but also preserves his own humanity. It's a testament to his character that even in the face of such adversity, he remains compassionate and empathetic. As days turn into nights and the walls of his prison cell seem to close in on him, Joseph doesn't succumb to despair. He turns his thoughts to his past. He remembers the dreams God had shown him, dreams that promised a future filled with prosperity and hope. These memories become his anchor, reminding him that his current circumstances are only temporary. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, the effects of Joseph's absence are felt deeply. His father, Jacob, is beside himself with worry, haunted by the thought that he may never see his beloved son again. The family he once knew is on the verge of collapse without Joseph's guidance and love holding it together. But the story doesn't end here, for Joseph's ordeal is about to take an unexpected turn. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, is troubled by a series of cryptic dreams. None of his advisors can decipher their meaning, leaving him in a state of confusion and anxiety. Suddenly, one of Pharaoh's officials remembers Joseph as the wise Hebrew prisoner who had interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. Hope flickers in Pharaoh's eyes. Perhaps this man can unravel the mysteries that have been plaguing him. With renewed determination, Joseph is brought before Pharaoh. As he stands before the ruler of Egypt, the weight of his situation presses down on him. Every step he takes echoes with the memories of his fall from grace, his time in prison, and the longing for his family. But Joseph, ever the embodiment of resilience, stands tall. When Pharaoh reveals his dreams, Joseph listens intently. In that moment, he sees an opportunity not just to interpret the dreams, but to shape the course of his own destiny. With a mix of wisdom, insight, and a touch of divine inspiration, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, revealing their hidden meanings. Pharaoh is astounded by Joseph's wisdom and immediately recognizes that he has found someone truly special. Impressed by his intelligence and quick thinking, Pharaoh offers Joseph a position of great power and trust, making him the administrator over all of Egypt. In an instant, Joseph's fortunes change. He rises from the depths of despair to the heights of power. It's a dramatic turnaround that seems almost too good to be true. But Joseph, with his unwavering integrity and ability to handle immense responsibility, proves himself worthy of the trust placed in him. As Joseph settles into his new role, he doesn't forget those who have stood by him through the toughest times. He brings his father Jacob and his brothers to live in Egypt, turning a new chapter in their family's history. Despite the hardships they've endured, their unity and love for each other remain intact. So remember this: no matter how difficult your circumstances may seem, don't lose hope. Hold on to your dreams and values, and never stop believing in the goodness of your purpose. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories, and until next time, keep believing in the beauty of Joseph's journey. In the vast halls of ancient Egypt, there lived a man who had once been sold into slavery by his own father. His name was Joseph, a dreamer who had dared to see beyond the horizon. A man whose very existence was a thorn in the side of those who had wronged him so deeply they had plotted to destroy him. But somehow, against all odds, he had risen to become the right-hand man of the Pharaoh, the ruler of the most powerful nation on earth. Yet despite his lofty status, a deep shadow lingered in his heart, a wound that refused to heal. For he knew that the very throne he occupied was built on a foundation of betrayal and deceit. His brothers, the architects of his misery, were still out there, and he bore the scars of their treachery deep within his soul. And one day, as if fate itself had orchestrated the cruelest irony, word arrived that the very kingdom he now ruled over was facing a terrible famine, a calamity that threatened to engulf not only Egypt, but the entire known world. And among the many victims of this catastrophe were his family, his parents and his brothers. In that moment, Joseph's heart was torn asunder. Should he turn away, consumed by resentment and anger towards the very people who had caused him so much pain? Or should he extend a hand of mercy, risking his own hard-earned position and the precarious peace of his kingdom for the sake of forgiveness and reconciliation? It was a choice that would not only shape the destiny of nations, but also define the very essence of Joseph's soul. Friends, welcome to this channel. Join us in this video as we embark on a profound exploration of one of the Bible's most compelling narratives. We delve into the story of Joseph and his journey from a betrayed dreamer to a powerful leader, and ultimately to the depths of forgiveness. As we navigate this timeless tale, we will examine the complexities of Joseph's character, the depths of his resilience, and the transformative power of his decision to forgive those who had wronged him so deeply. Joseph found himself at the peak of success, ruling over the land of Egypt with wisdom and grace. Yet his rise to power had been a tumultuous one, marked by envy, deceit, and betrayal by his own brothers who had sold him into slavery. Despite the hardships he endured, Joseph had never allowed his spirit to break. His unwavering faith in God and his ability to interpret dreams had led him to become the Pharaoh's right-hand man. However, his past still haunted him. The memory of his father's rejection and his brother's treachery was a constant ache in his heart. One fateful day, messengers arrived from Canaan with news that a severe famine was ravaging the land. What made this particularly distressing was that his family, the very people who had caused him so much pain, were now caught in the grip of this calamity. Torn between his duty to his adopted country, Egypt, and his responsibility towards his biological family, Joseph found himself at a crossroads. The first thought that crossed his mind was one of anger and resentment. Why should he, the victim of their deceit, come to the rescue of the very people who had tried to destroy him? His heart was filled with bitterness, and for a moment he allowed himself to revel in the misfortune that had befallen them. But as these thoughts consumed him, Joseph realized that he was allowing his pain to fester, to poison his soul. He understood that if he chose to turn away from his brothers, he would forever remain a prisoner of his past. His rise to greatness would be incomplete, his spirit forever tainted by the chains of bitterness. In that moment of profound introspection, Joseph made a decision. He chose to extend a hand of forgiveness and reconciliation towards his brothers. But this was no easy feat. To forgive meant to risk not only his own hard-earned position, but also the precarious peace of his kingdom. It meant confronting the ghosts of his past and braving the turmoil that lay within his own heart. Yet Joseph, driven by an unwavering sense of justice and a profound faith in God, was determined to take this leap of faith. He devised a plan, a test of their sincerity, a way to gauge whether their motives were pure or if they still harbored ill will towards him. With a heavy heart, he resolved to confront them, to face the demons of his past head-on, and seek a resolution that would bring healing to his fractured family. As the meeting between Joseph and his brothers unfolded, the weight of their past transgressions hung heavy in the air. The brothers, haggard and desperate, stood before Joseph, each bearing the burden of their shared guilt. Their once proud demeanor was now replaced by a humility born of desperation and remorse. They had come seeking aid, but they stood as supplicants, their heads bowed under the weight of their sins. Joseph, though cloaked in the finery of his royal status, was transformed in their eyes. His regal bearing was stripped away, revealing the hurt young man they had wronged so grievously. The emotions in the room were a tempest of conflicting feelings. The brothers, tormented by the memory of their past actions, struggled to reconcile with the man they had betrayed. Joseph, wrestling with his own hurt and anger, grappled with the decision of whether to forgive or condemn. The atmosphere crackled with tension, each heartbeat echoing the uncertainty of what would come next. Finally, Joseph, his voice trembling with emotion, broke the silence. "Why have you come here?" he asked, his words sharp with pain. His brothers, their voices hoarse with remorse, confessed their deeds, acknowledging the sin they had committed years ago. They laid bare their hearts, pouring out apologies that were as heartfelt as they were belated. As their words filled the chamber, Joseph was torn. The wounds they had inflicted ran deep, but he sensed a change in them, a genuine sorrow that resonated with the truth of their words. The battle in his heart was intense. Should he hold on to the pain that had become a part of his identity, or take the perilous journey towards forgiveness? During this pivotal moment, Joseph turned his gaze upward, seeking solace and guidance in prayer. He poured out his heart to God, acknowledging the depth of his pain, the complexity of his emotions, and the uncertainty of his path. In that moment of quiet desperation, he sought not only for strength, but for wisdom to navigate the treacherous waters of forgiveness. As the minutes ticked by, Joseph felt a shift within him. The anger and resentment that had been his constant companions began to dissipate, replaced by a dawning realization. He saw not just treacherous brothers, but human beings broken by their own mistakes, yearning for redemption. In that revelation, he found the key to his own liberation. With newfound resolve, Joseph turned back to his brothers, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. He spoke, his voice no longer sharp with pain, but gentle with the weight of compassion. He recounted the years of torment he had endured, laying bare the scars that ran deep within his soul. But he also acknowledged the change he had seen in them, the genuineness of their remorse, and the hope for a better future. In that moment, Joseph made his decision. He forgave. It was not a light-hearted act, but a conscious choice, laden with emotion. He freed them, not just from the bonds of their past deeds, but also from the shackles of their guilt. In the aftermath of Joseph's magnanimous gesture, a profound transformation took place. The brothers, overwhelmed with gratitude and remorse, pledged to make amends. They vowed to care for their father and ensure his well-being during the famine. In the weeks that followed, Joseph's wisdom and foresight proved invaluable. The land of Egypt thrived, while Canaan, though stricken by famine, was sustained by the provisions Joseph had secured. As the seasons turned, and the land began to flourish once more. A sense of unity and purpose bound the family together. And as the years rolled on, Joseph's legacy endured. The story of his forgiveness became a beacon of hope, a testament to the triumph of the human spirit over adversity and the enduring power of familial bonds. Joseph's journey is a mirror reflecting our own complexities. It teaches us that greatness doesn't mean flawlessness. He reminds us that even in the highest positions, we can struggle with doubts and fears. He shows us that life's ups and downs, its successes and setbacks are not isolated events, but threads in the grand tapestry of our existence. His story invites us to be more compassionate, to understand that everyone, regardless of their achievements, carries their own burdens and battles. Joseph's journey towards forgiveness is a beacon, reminding us that while pain and betrayal can deeply wound us, the path to healing often lies in empathy and understanding. It's a call for us to not just endure our pain, but to strive to overcome it with grace and dignity. Joseph's journey is an ode to resilience, a celebration of the indomitable spirit that resides in each of us. It encourages us to persevere through life's challenges, to never lose hope, and to always strive for excellence. He embodies the belief that one can rise above their circumstances and achieve greatness even in the face of adversity. The story of Joseph is a potent blend of human frailty and divine providence. It urges us to trust in a higher power, to believe that even in our darkest moments, there is a guiding light leading us towards a brighter horizon. It whispers to us that our struggles may lead to triumphs we never imagined possible. As we reflect on Joseph's extraordinary life, let his journey serve as a guiding light for us all. May it inspire us to pursue our dreams with unwavering determination, to navigate life's challenges with resilience, and to embrace forgiveness and understanding in our relationships. In the tapestry of life, may we all strive to be like Joseph, not because he was perfect, but because he dared to dream, to forgive, and to rise above. There they were, the same faces that laughed as he cried for mercy, the same voices that sold him like an object, the same hands that threw him into the pit now reached out for food hungry. Tired, unaware they were standing before the boy they once betrayed, and Joseph recognized them instantly. But they didn't know him. He looked like an Egyptian, dressed in royal robes, crowned with power, surrounded by guards. But inside, his heart was racing, not with rage, not with revenge, with something deeper. Wounds, old ones, buried under years of silence and success, the kind of wounds that ache, even when you smile. And suddenly, he had the power. Power to arrest, power to accuse, power to destroy. But Joseph didn't destroy them. Instead, he tested them not out of vengeance, but to see if they had changed. He accused them of being spies, held Simeon back, sent the rest home with grain and a hidden silver cup. He wept in secret. He watched them squirm. He listened to their guilt rise to the surface like echoes from the past. Then they came again, this time with Benjamin, the youngest, the only brother from Rachel, Joseph's full brother. His last connection to the mother he lost too soon. When Joseph saw him, he almost broke. "God be gracious unto thee, my son," he said, barely holding back tears. And when Judah, the very one who had said, "Let sell him," offered himself in Benjamin's place, Joseph couldn't take it anymore. He sent the servants out, locked the doors, and then it happened. He wept loudly, uncontrollably. A sound so deep, so broken, so human. The entire palace heard it. And then came the moment that shattered years of silence. "I am Joseph," he said. "Does my father yet live?" The brothers stood frozen, his faces pale, hearts pounding. They thought he was dead. Now he stood before them not as a ghost, but as a ruler. "What do you say to the person you tried to destroy, who now holds your fate in his hands?" But Joseph looked at them with tears in his eyes and said something no one expected. "Now therefore, be not grieved nor angry with yourselves, for God did send me before you to preserve life." Hello everyone, welcome to another message. There are people who look at the book of Genesis and think it is just a bunch of old stories that have nothing to do with us today. But if we read Genesis chapter 45, verse 5 again, we see a man who faced unimaginable pain. It's unimaginable loss, unimaginable betrayal, and still chose to forgive. And he didn't just say, "Oh, I forgive you." No, he acted on his forgiveness. He said, "You sold me into slavery. Okay, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else." How many of you are trying to hold on to a dream despite the fact that you've been betrayed? How many of you are trying to reach a goal despite the fact that someone close to you has wronged you deeply? We all get hurt. We all get betrayed. We all face pain, and it seems impossible to move forward. But this story shows us that forgiveness is possible. It may seem impossible, but God can help you. You can choose to forgive others, and forgiveness changes everything. The first thing I want to point out is that when Joseph's brothers come to Egypt to buy food, they don't recognize him. He looks completely different. Verse 3 tells us, and Joseph was the same. He had told his brothers neither who he was, nor they knew him not. For 10 years, Joseph had been in Potiphar's prison, and then he'd become vizier of Egypt. He had power. He was wearing fancy clothes. He wasn't the skinny, dirty prisoner anymore. So why does Joseph hide his identity? Well, I think it's because he wanted to test his brothers. He wanted to see if they had really changed, and the way he tested them was really cruel. I mean, imagine you re one of Joseph's brothers, and you come to Egypt to buy food for your family. Your family is starving and you need this food. And the guy who gives you the food is the one who you betrayed and threw into a pit and left to die. Now he's treating you like common criminals. How would you feel? Guilty, ashamed, afraid? I think so. And Joseph wanted them to feel guilty. He wanted to see if they had changed, or if they were the same people who would do anything to save themselves. And Joseph tests them in some pretty extreme ways. First, he accuses them of being spies. He says, "You are spies. You have come to see whether there is a famine in the land. That is what you have come for." Man said to them, "It is as I suspected. You are a spy." These guys must have been terrified. Imagine thinking you're about to get free food, and then this guy starts screaming at you and says, "You're a spy?" If this happened to me, I would probably start looking for the nearest exit. But Joseph wasn't done. In verse 26 he says, "But this my Lord doth speak of, saying, We are honest men, my Lord, we are honest men, we came not to spy, nor to do any harm, either great or little, unto the inhabitants of the land. But we are come to buy bread." And Joseph replied to them, "No, not even by one, but thus shall it be. Say to yourselves, This shall be our bargain." So he let them go back home without any food. He made them leave their youngest brother behind, and he put his own brother in charge of making sure they didn't escape. But Joseph continued to test them. He put a silver cup, which belonged to the king, into the sack of one of the men. Then he had the man arrested and accused him of stealing, the Bible says. So when Benjamin's sack was searched and the cup found, they all tore their clothes and said, "We are not, my lord, we are not thieves." Joseph didn't reveal himself until after he'd tested his brothers. He wanted to know if they were truly sorry for what they'd done. And the only way he could know that was to test them. The question is, why did Joseph want to forgive them? Why didn't he just let them rot in prison? Well, I think it's because Joseph understood something very important. When you hold on to bitterness, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The person you're holding on to the grudge against will never know what they've done wrong. They'll never apologize. And it'll sun up to you to decide whether you going to continue being bitter, or whether you going to release that bitterness and move on with your life. So Joseph let his brothers go, but he made them bring his youngest brother, Benjamin, back to Egypt with them. Benjamin was the last of his mother's children. When Joseph saw Benjamin, the Bible says he burst out and wept. I think he was overwhelmed with emotion. This was his last connection to his mom. His brothers had brought her son to Egypt. What would happen next? Well, when Judah offered himself up instead of Benjamin, Joseph finally revealed himself. The Bible says that when he did this, Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by. And he cried, "Set from the face of all servants," and he wept. This must have been an amazing moment. After 10 years of pain and suffering, Joseph was finally reunited with his family. But the most important thing about this reunion is what Joseph said to his brothers. As I mentioned earlier, Joseph said that God had sent him to preserve life. And he also told them, and Joseph said unto his brothers, "Come near, I will tell you what I am." And when his brothers came near, he said, "I am Joseph. Is my father yet alive?" After Joseph revealed himself, he invited his brothers to come and live in Egypt. He helped his family survive the famine, and he eventually became the ruler of all of Egypt. Joseph was able to forgive his brothers because he realized that God was in control of the situation. He trusted that God had a plan for his life, even though he didn't understand it at the time. I think Joseph's story teaches us 3 important lessons about forgiveness. First, it takes time to forgive. Joseph didn't forgive his brothers right away. He waited until he was in a position of power and he had the ability to help his family. Second, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Joseph never forgot what his brothers did to him. He remembered that they sold him into slavery and they tried to kill him. But he also knew that they were genuinely sorry for what they'd done, and that's why he forgave them. Third, forgiveness sets you free. When Joseph forgave his brothers, he was finally able to move on with his life. He was able to have a family of his own, and he was able to help his people survive the famine. Forgiveness set him free from the pain of the past. In conclusion, I want to say that Joseph was a remarkable man. He was able to forgive his brothers, and he was able to use his pain to help his family. I think we can all learn from Joseph's example. Next time you're dealing with someone who's hurt you, ask yourself, what would Joseph do? Remember, forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. It doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means moving on. It doesn't mean condoning the person's behavior. It means giving them a second chance. Joseph didn't just rise to power. He rose above the pain. That's something we can all strive for in our lives. Thank you for watching. Have you ever looked back on your life and thought, if only things had happened differently? Maybe there was a certain choice that you wish you hadn't made, a path you wish you hadn't taken, a moment you wish you could have back. And then you realize God has something else planned. That's exactly what happened to Joseph, the 11th son of Jacob, who we meet in today's passage. It was a day like any other until news reached Cana in Egypt. Joseph is alive. Now, imagine being Jacob. You're old, you're weary, your body is broken by years of grief. Your wife Rachel has been dead for years. You haven't seen your son Joseph since he was a boy. And all those years ago you thought he was dead. For so long you've lived under that lie. You've mourned a son you thought was gone forever. But the truth shatters the grave you have built in your heart, both physically and emotionally. So the journey begins. Chariots roll across the desert, dust, and time. Give way to something sacred. And when Joseph finally sees his father, the man who once gave him a robe of many colors, the man who once wept over that blood-stained garment, he's standing before him, and they embrace. And Joseph, the ruler of Egypt, the man with the signet ring and chariots and power, buries his face in his father's shoulder and weeps. And he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. But think about how Jacob felt in that moment, right? Here's this guy who he hasn't seen in decades, come strolling into his life with all this power and wealth. I mean, obviously Joseph didn't look the same. Jacob was probably shocked. In fact, he didn't recognize Joseph at first. Joseph had to identify himself. And then Jacob says, "Is it really you, Joseph, my son, whom I have lost with tears?" Jacob didn't know what to say. He didn't know what to do. Just knew that he needed to bury his face in his son's shoulder and let out all that grief he'd been holding on to for so long. He'd grieved Joseph's loss for so long that now he was grieving their reunion. Some moments, they just bring you to your knees. After Jacob and Joseph were reunited, Joseph took his family and settled them in Egypt. He gave them the best of the land. He reunited what was broken. And for the first time in years, he wasn't alone. His story didn't end with betrayal. It ended with restoration. If Joseph's story teaches us anything, it's that the pit is not the end. The prison is not your final address. The betrayal is not your identity. But what happened after Jacob died? You see, when someone dies, there's always that window period where you wonder, what will happen now? Like, what happens to the things they've built? What happens to the people they've left behind? Where do they go? What happens now? And in that moment, that transition phase is where the brothers feared that Joseph would seek revenge. That maybe all the grace and mercy he'd shown them had an expiration date. So they begged. They threw themselves down. They said, "We are your servants." But Joseph, now older, now seasoned by mercy, looked at them with love and said something that echoes across eternity. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Now those words are more than a verse. They're a battle cry for the broken, a declaration for the forgotten, a promise for anyone who's been thrown away, lied about, betrayed, or buried. When we think of Joseph, we tend to focus on two things: That we see him in that pit, sold by his brothers, and forsaken by everyone, literally stuck in a hole. Or we see him in the palace, living the life of luxury, wearing fancy clothes, driving fancy cars, having lots of money, basically on top of the world. We either picture him in the pit, or we picture him on top of the mountain. But rarely do we stop and appreciate what it was like in between. Rarely do we consider what it must have been like for Joseph as he transitioned from a neglected boy who was hated by his father and sold by his brothers to the most powerful person in Egypt. The truth is, when we think of Joseph's story, we tend to focus on the extremes, the highs and the lows. But we forget the valleys. Yet Joseph's story reminds us that sometimes it's in the valleys that God meets us, strengthens us, and forms us. Sometimes it's in the valleys that we discover our true identities, not because of what happened to us, but because of who shows up for us. Joseph has transitioned from a neglected boy to a powerful man is one of the most dramatic stories in the Bible. It's a tale of betrayal and forgiveness, of hardship and hope, of despair and deliverance. If Joseph's story teaches us anything, it's that God can use anything and anyone for his purposes. He can take a hated and rejected boy and turn him into the most powerful man in Egypt. He can take a pit and turn it into a place of preservation. He can take a prison and turn it into a place of promotion. He can take a famine and turn it into a platform. Look, Joseph didn't choose to be sold into slavery. He didn't choose to be thrown into prison. He didn't choose the famine that ravaged the land. But he did choose to trust God through it all. He chose to believe that God was with him, that God had a purpose for him, and that God would use his circumstances for good. And in the end, Joseph's faith was rewarded. He became the savior of Egypt and the head of his family. If Joseph's story teaches us anything, it's that we shouldn't give up in the middle of our story. Don't get discouraged halfway through your race. Don't quit when you're almost there. Don't give up when things get tough. Keep going. Keep believing. Keep trusting. Because you never know what's around the corner. You never know how things might change. You never know how God might use your pain, your struggles, your scars, your past. Joseph's story also teaches us to forgive. He could have easily held on to his anger and resentment towards his brothers. They sold him into slavery. They stripped him of his dignity. They shattered his dreams. But instead, he chose to forgive. He chose to see their betrayal as an opportunity for God to show his power and his mercy. Ow! And that brings us to the main point of Joseph's story. He teaches us that no matter what happens, no matter what we go through, no matter how difficult our circumstances are, God is still in control. He can take our pain and make something beautiful out of it. He can take our scars and turn them into a source of strength and healing. He can take our past and use it to shape our future. So next time you find yourself in a difficult situation, remember Joseph. Trust God. Believe in his promises. Forgive those who hurt you, and never, ever, ever, ever give up. In conclusion, Joseph's story is a reminder that God is in control. He can take our pain and make something beautiful out of it. He can take our scars and turn them into a source of strength and healing. He can take our past and use it to shape our future. So no matter what we go through, we should trust God, believe in his promises, forgive those who hurt us, and never give up. That's all for this message. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.